It's like a dream when you're in a battle. Everything slows down. You can hear bullets whizzing by you, it sounds like a beat. People, when they get shot, they seem to float to the ground, although I know they're really hitting the ground hard. And hearing those sounds of the artillery and the ground vibrating, and watching 5 or 6 people disappear next to you. I mean, when I say disappear, they're gone. I'm frightened the whole time, but I keep loading my weapon and firing on command.
It was the summer of 1862. Richmond was in the crosshairs of the Union Army. From the birth of the Confederate government in Richmond, Henrico was part of the first line of defense and was certain to witness firsthand the bloodshed of the war between the states.
I don't think anybody who first joined in '61 had any idea what they were getting into. Even some of the veterans who fought in Mexico, I don't think they had any idea what this was going to do.
I didn't know what to expect. Honestly, I didn't know what to expect, and most of us did. Nobody thought the war would go on as long as it has, and nobody knows when it's going to end. We're all trying to get to Richmond. We're all trying to get to Richmond in this war.
Richmond's pretty much the backbone of everything, so we can't. And center of more or less of Virginia, so if we get knocked out early, it's not going to last long for the rest of them.
Ready! Fire!
Richmond is the capital of the Confederacy. We cannot lose Richmond.
The end of the Peninsula Campaign drew near as troops entered the fourth of the 7 days battles, which ran from June 25th to July 1st. Union forces were in retreat after the initial advance on Richmond was repulsed and were abandoning their supply depot and hospital at Savage Station in eastern Henrico County.
We were raised here. These people were raised here. This is our hometown. This is our country. And we know the lay of the land. This is a distinct advantage to us.
We're on our home territory. We're fighting in their backyard, so I don't think it's going to be easy for them just because they have a huge number.
And while we may be outnumbered, we can outmaneuver them. We can maneuver an army of 60,000 men a whole lot easier than they can maneuver an army of 120,000. Logistically, we're much better off.
The Confederacy had few other advantages over the North, whose troops were better supplied. While the North fought to preserve the Union and the South fought for independence, common perception on both sides was that it was going to be a short conflict.
We thought that at first. It's been a short war.
I mean, we whipped up on a bunch of Yankees that came up the peninsula. So I have to agree with the generals. This is not going to last very long.
It's going to take a while. How long, we don't know yet, but I think we'll be fighting for a while.
We're always outnumbered. And it's not like I can go to President Davis and say, President Davis, I need 10,000 more men. We don't have that luxury that Mr. Lincoln has. And so we have to make certain that we protect our men in every possible way that we can. And all you have to do is look at the defenses. And you can see the time and the effort that's been put into these defenses for the purpose of making certain that Richmond prevails.
President Jefferson Davis had only recently, on June 1st, assigned Robert E. Lee to lead the Army of Northern Virginia. This came after the wounding of General Joseph Johnston at Seven Pines. Confederate Generals Lee and Magruder were now pitted against U.S. Generals McClellan and Sumner. Johnston had allowed the Union troops to get so close to Richmond they could hear the Sunday church bells ringing. Now, Lee was prepared to make them pay for every inch they had gained.
There were some angry Yankees because the Confederates whipped up on them in a place called Coal Harbor, and it took them like a day and a half, but they whipped up on them good, and then they commenced to running, and they just kept going after them. They wouldn't quit.
It was a critical battle in the sense that Lee had given Magruder instructions to press the enemy, press them back. They're going toward James River. Keep after them. Magruder, being cautious, did not press as hard, and perhaps he was cautious for a reason. He was outnumbered 2-1. And he wasn't getting the support that had been promised him. Lee had said Jackson will come over from north of the Chickahominy. Jackson didn't come over right away.
Bridges have been burned after we burned as we went through. The Confederates burned some of the bridges. Now it's become totally disorganized. Corps are mixed up into corps, battalions into battalions, companies into companies. Trying to move a large group of men through swamp, through thick woods, the organization just totally falls apart. We're moving too fast, we're moving past our supply lines. The men are going without food, their clothes are in shreds, some have no shoes. About the only thing that we can truly get is ammunition.
Even though we're badly outnumbered, we can press their weaknesses, which is exactly what we did.
General McClellan is a West Pointer, and we're volunteers. We're not trained military men, so maybe our attitudes are wrong, maybe he's right, only history will tell us that. But he is determined to get to the James River, and when battles probably should be taken, when we run up against a Confederate corps, we're not engaging. They're engaging us and we're falling back. And all we're doing at this point in time is rear guard action just to keep the Confederates off of our main body.
Right back! Hey!
The best two words to describe General McClellan is deliberation incarnate. He was always very slow to move. And then when you consider that the person that he was counting on to provide him with reliable information was a man named Pinkerton. And Mr. Pinkerton always overestimated our numbers. If we had one division, he always told McClellan we had 3 divisions. And if we had, one corps, why, he told McClellan there were 3 corps sitting out there.
The Confederate success at Gaines Mill, or First Cold Harbor, on June 27th had convinced McClellan to give up the advance on Richmond and begin retreating to the James River, despite heavier Southern casualties. Due to overestimation of enemy forces, McClellan was convinced that he had lost the battle and needed to save his army.
The night before the Battle of Savage Station opens, we were still having a running fight through the woods. It had rained and stormed. Several people had been struck by lightning.
They were actually moving an artillery piece up aiming towards Savage Station and trying to guard one of the fords. And they were moving up a little bit of a rise right over the water, and at the same time, lightning bolt hit the artillery piece and killed 6 people.
Horses have been killed by lightning. It was a terrible thunderstorm. We get to Savage Station, and a determination is made by General Heintzelman that we're going to hold here to let the rest of the army finally get through White Oak Swamp. The men are all mixed up. The companies, battalions, corps are all jumbled together.
Battle is confusing. There are times where we fall back and reform up and you don't know where your men are. Some people have formed up into other units just because they've gotten lost. They don't know what's happened to them.
It makes it difficult to give men orders when they know that you're not their commander. They'll look at you and go, I don't have to listen to you. You're not my commander. Some will, some won't. And it makes command extremely difficult when you're trying to reach an objective. They're going to have to obey our orders. If not, they're committing treason in the face of the enemy, the worst thing that a soldier can do.
The troops that were engaged in this battle had been stationed here for months. So they were kind of accustomed to a routine. But actual attack and retreat, first off, the basic Union troops, the man in the ranks, he was following orders, but he didn't like it as much as one might think.
In the field, disobeying orders, they could be shot on the spot. Don't have time to hang anybody.
And neither did the Union commanders. As a matter of fact, McClellan gave them instructions to pull back from Savage Station, across the White Oak Swamp, and go over to Glendale, and then to Malvern Hill, and then to the James. Sumner didn't want to. He was against his grain, but he knew he had to follow orders.
As the Confederates challenged us, they pushed forward, we tried to keep them off, and then we finally got pushed back. And the orders came down from McClellan to abandon the hospital. Of course, the surgeons, they did not want to leave these casualties. And McClellan says, we're out of here.
We cannot take Richmond right now, according to the general staff. There is a difference of opinion among the field grade officers, but at this point we have a tendency to agree because the entire organization has just crumbled. There's no organization at all. As of 28 June, General McClellan has taken up his base at Savage Station and has moved on through the swamp.
This was not Lincoln or McClellan's original intention for the Peninsula Campaign.
McClellan had planned to come on down and then cross the Chickahominy and hit Richmond from the north. Well, Lee decided to try to beat him to the punch. I'm not saying Lee knew, but Lee was the type of general that and tactician that he didn't rush into anything blindly. He analyzed all points. I'm sure he did. Lee's been accused of trying to demand too much of his army, or the army of that period. If that's what aggressiveness is, then that's what aggressiveness is.
Emboldened by McClellan's retreat, they attacked repeatedly that week. As with all warfare, the aggressiveness of the general is manifested in the reality of battle and hardship for the foot soldier.
On that particular morning, some guys would eat breakfast, some wouldn't, some didn't have it to eat because the supplies had generally already crossed over the swamp. The foot soldier is thinking about following his men, and he's contemplating what is going to happen to him during this battle. Is he going to make it out? Some people have premonitions that they're not going to make it out.
I dream of this stuff every night, and sometimes I dream of myself dying.
Some people just totally don't even worry about it. Faith probably comes into a lot of play there.
You just focus on one thing, and you keep going, and you keep going, and you keep going. You don't question anything, you just follow orders.
The commander, of course, he has a lot of time to think about himself getting killed.
The cannon firing in, the bullets whizzing by, falling in that stuff, getting all wet, and then continuing to fight.
I've seen men who were wounded, and then they're lying on the ground, and you're still in front of them, and you're still fighting, and they just want to be shot. In the pain, in the suffering, and you just can't get over it.
You had no idea that humans could do that to one another. It's beyond words. I just really couldn't put it into words. It's extremely horrifying. I mean, one minute you'll see a guy standing there beside you, the next minute he'll just disappear to where a cannon shot might hit him, and he'll just take his whole body away, and it's just that quick. The sounds of the bullets that they make going past you, like hornets.
In some cases, if a solid shot came through and knocked off the top of the tree, that meant the tree was coming down. And so they had to worry about that, but mainly they were worried about getting through that and meeting the enemy. Many of them sought cover behind trees and then inched forward.
So guys start digging in, finding places around the railroad embankments. Any structure you can find, you're taking cover behind.
Some of them, you know, the adrenaline was pumping so much they just kept going. But still, the buzzing going around them, and they could hear them going by, and they were just, I guess, thankful that they went by and didn't stop.
Nothing to do but go forward. And they kept pushing you forward, saying, onward, men, onward. And you struggle with all your might, and you get to a little piece of dry ground, and you want to lay down and rest, and they keep pushing you forward.
The Confederates were in the woods. The Yankees were in the open. For the individual soldier, it was a moment of fear, no two ways about it. But the majority of them knew they had to go forward.
You could die at any moment. As soon as they start firing at us, we could die at any moment. We can get hit by artillery shells, a canister shot. We never know. We never know. But in line, we can't think about it. We just have to think about getting them.
On the battle, you don't have time to think about it. When you get back to camp and have a few minutes to sit down, it hits you.
Fire.
My best friend next to me could get it, or a ricochet off a tree, splinter could get me, or just the ball itself. A lot of amputations. Surgeons say they can't do much with it, the wounds. They hit you in the body. But makes you think. Is the next shot gonna be mine?
We're all trained the same. None of us are any better than the others, those of us in the ranks. It's just by chance that some of us have still survived and some of us have not.
It makes you wonder how anybody could walk away from it, you know? The biggest problem is after it's all over with, then that's when it sets in. But when it's going on, you just don't think about it. You don't have time to think about it. You know, you're just trying to stay alive.
What made them go forward? Personal character. Most of these units were one town, one county, you know, and so they knew each other. They were going to go forward with each other and fight for each other, north and south.
A company was usually formed out of a community. A community went to war together. And if you're walking into battle and marching into battle and you're coming up against cannon, if you turn and ran and one of those other men of the company got back to that community, what would your name be? And that's what I think most of them kept going for. I mean, it takes a special person to walk up to the mouth of a cannon, knowing that, yeah, they may have fired at something and I'm blown away. And a lot of them did. They were vaporized. But it's a matter of pride and a matter of vanity, too. They did not want to be called a coward when they got home.
They were raised with each other. They farmed next to each other. They worked with each other, knew each other's families. The last thing that they want to do is for somebody from this regiment to go back home to Ohio and say, last time I saw John, he was running up at the Battle of Savage Station. He was a coward. Because his name will be ruined in his community. They want to live another day. They want to finish this war. They want to go back home to their families. And they want to have that good name and to know that they did serve the Army of the United States in an honorable manner.
The Civil War was the last of the archaic wars and the first of the modern ones. It became a war of many firsts and lasts as technology outpaced battle tactics. One first came at the Battle of Savage Station. Not only did soldiers face the horrors of rifle shot and bayonet charge, on this day, the Confederate Army rolled out a new weapon, the first of its kind used in battle.
The railroad gun was built at the request of General Robert E. Lee. It's called the Land Monitor by some people. The engine would be backed up, and then you'd have to roll it again forward. It was that powerful a recoil. You can imagine the fear in the men when they heard that thing, too. One army was in retreat. One army was on the offensive. To maintain that offensive, you had to maintain the pressure on the retreating army. Now, in the scheme of things, the fact that the Union troops held Magruder back, it also allowed the troops from north of Chickahominy to cross through and go on to James River. So it was a holding action in a sense, but it was more of a holding action than they had counted on because they didn't think the Confederates were that close. If Longstreet had crossed over New Bridge Road, turned to come down 9 Mile Road, and all of a sudden Sumner is facing Magruder, Longstreet, and A.P. Hill, goodbye.
This was not to be, however. McClellan would not face the full brunt of Lee's wrath, not at this point at least. It could have turned the tide of the war, but due to faulty intelligence that McClellan was receiving from Pinkerton and poor coordination between Lee and his generals, neither side took full advantage of the opportunity they were given. Nevertheless, the stakes were still high for soldier and citizen alike.
If we don't stop them here, then they will go on into Richmond and capture Richmond, and possibly there's been rumors that they possibly want to burn Richmond.
We have to hold this position and not let them take Richmond, because that would be detrimental to the South. That is our capital, and we'll fight to the death.
One of the things that made it so personal to so many of these people was they were from the same families, from the same neighborhood, from the same area. They knew each other.
I know our soldiers are going to defend the capital, and I know they're going to win.
2 Pennsylvania regiments went against 3 South Carolina regiments. And you can imagine the heat of battle.
We fire by battalions, we fire by companies, we fire by ranks, front rank, rear rank, to try to keep a constant, steady fire going. A lot of times though, we just fire at will. As fast as you can load it and fire it, keep going. And you keep firing until you're ordered to stop.
They've been retreating. They wanted to charge. They've given the chance to go over the hill and into the Confederates. They went with a bayonet charge. But as soon as they hit the South Carolinians, they reeled back.
When we fall back in line, we advance in line. When we charge, we go and go and go.
At the point of attack, Kershaw outnumbered the Union forces, but yet there were thousands of Union troops back behind by Savage Station, not too far away. And then they sent more reinforcements. Eventually they had 8 regiments against 3, so the Union line held.
Charge, bayonet.
If we ordered to charge, we charge and we make it to the line and we break their line, we're going to fire, but then we're going to use our bayonets to plow through. If they're still standing there, we will plow through them.
Few Union troops would get that chance. As McClellan's forces continued their retreat across the White Oak Swamp toward the James, Sumner had no idea how many Confederate troops were in pursuit. On the defensive, he ordered an entire division to turn around. Of that division, only 1 brigade went into battle, Brooks, Vermont.
When they went into battle, there were 2 regiments in front, 2 regiments in back. The right regiment was on the road, and Kemper's artillery let them have it. One company, Company E, had 57 men when it went into battle. 7 answered roll call next morning. There were a tremendous number of casualties. Over 400 went into battle, 206 were known casualties in that one regiment. And when they came forward, they not only hit Kemper, but they hit Semmes' 3 regiments. and it was getting dark. I realized this battle didn't start until around 4:30. And around 7, it was getting dusk. And the troops south of the road, in the trees, it was getting dark. And the Vermonters, Brooks Brigade, had to come into that woods and didn't know what they were facing. Fear set in, shock, and the individual could either continue forward or he could hunker down. If he felt alone, he'd probably hunker down.
In the war between the states, the flanking maneuver was the most terrifying maneuver. Your men are lined up, concentrating fire in front of them, and all of a sudden they start receiving fire from their sides, their flanks, or from the rear. The rear is absolutely terrifying. Nowhere to run.
Just the noise and the atmosphere and the heat. Now, you know, this was a hot day, and that night it began a typical summer storm. And it rained most of the night. Just the magnitude of the noise and the death being so close, and then seeing people on either side of you, you know, get hit. Doesn't mean they were killed, but they may have been maimed. You know, a 68 caliber, 57 caliber can rip you off, yeah. And once you lost a limb, the next thing was trying to stop the bleeding. And then trying to get you to an aid station if there was one there nearby. Usually they didn't start treating the wounded until after the battle.
I go out between the lines and try to ease the pain and save lives out there. But I do it on an equal basis. If there's a Confederate fallen soldier, I'll tend to him as I will a Union soldier. You can't do too much for the man in the field except staunch his blood, put a tourniquet on him, a bandage if possible, give him an opium pill to reduce the shock. There wasn't a thing in the medicine chest, a doctor's medicine chest, that would cure anybody. What the Civil War surgeon had going for them was that they did have anesthesia by that time. So this reduced the shock deaths among troops.
Those that did survive, they lost their friends. So the survivors were shaken by the loss of so many and the carnage.
Some places you can't walk. You're stepping on bodies. You're tripping over bodies.
They're retiring down Williamsburg Road. They're passing all these hospital tents, and they're not quiet. You know, these guys are in there, and surgeons are working over. You know, they say they work until 3 a.m. in the morning and then collapsed out of exhaustion. Amputation was the principal way of getting rid of a wound, if it's in a limb.
The field hospitals are not a good place to be. If you manage to get to one, you lose your arm, you lose your leg, and you're crippled for life. Or they just put you out of your misery. And I mean, that's what the men on the field want.
The Confederates, they experienced it on their side as well.
Every one of those soldiers meant they were a person to me. My heart bled for every single soldier that died. But we also have a duty to perform. Every one of us has a duty. In fact, we should do our duty in all things. We cannot do more, and we should never do less. And my duty as commanding officer of the Army of Northern Virginia was to protect Richmond, to defend the Confederacy. If that meant that we had to issue commands that sent our young men into harm's way, then it was something that we had to do.
The Union casualties on the field were about 1,600. Confederate casualties, 350, 375. In addition, you had the approximately 2,500 Union invalids, prisoners, made prisoners in the hospital at Savage Station. There were hospital tents all over the place at Savage Station and down Williamsburg Road, and Union surgeons, some of them volunteered to stay behind to treat the wounded. And they were taken prisoner. They did leave medical supplies for treating their own wounded. Of course, some of them were taken by the Confederates.
These were supplies that the Confederate troops needed badly, just as they needed an occasional reminder of home and family.
I'm here at the war, in the battle, because my husband is fighting in the war, and I'm proud of him.
Some of the ladies sometimes are looking for their husband or were trying to find them, and they will come out from Richmond. 3 or 4 of them might come out in a carriage, and some of them would bring some eggs and you know, some fresh vegetables out with them. And they're mainly looking for their husbands. They want to see that they're okay. And they come and visit the camps, and we carry on conversations with them, just reassure them that they're all right, even if we don't know what unit they're in. And half of the wives didn't know. They knew their husband was a soldier.
I'll be here for the whole battle, because it's not going to be that long. Then I'll go home and we'll just start over again.
We just would comfort them and they would comfort us. There's nothing like having a lady come and visit the camp.
You know, we serve as camp mother to a lot of the younger boys, and just someone, you know, to talk to for a lot of the men.
We do follow the soldiers around, and we do the manual labor. We try to help them out. When their clothes get dirty, if their clothes need washing, I'll wash them and I'll fix meals for them. Anything to help the troops.
Wherever the Army settled, either Army, after they encamped, then it sort of became an unauthorized scorched earth policy. You know, they ate up everything around them, they used all the timber, they took down the rail fences, they occupied all the houses, and especially if they weren't occupied, people left their houses and their furnishings.
We're hearing that soldiers may be coming through. Instead of staying there, I would decided just to pack everyone out and just to head out and try to find my husband.
One of those occupied homes in Henrico was that of George Savage, a gentleman justice on the Henrico court, who actually remained on his property throughout the occupation. Being on the Richmond and York River Railroad, it was an ideal location for the Union Army to set up camp.
Savage Station was a supply depot.
The supply trains coming from Washington City came in by way of the peninsula up the Chesapeake Bay, and they were wagoned up the peninsula from Yorktown through Williamsburg to James City County up that way there. And Savage Station was relatively close to the river as far as unloading and storing supplies were concerned. It was a major supply refit point is what it turned out to be. It was enough for an army to refit itself there.
And once they had moved, Savage Station was it. And they couldn't evacuate their supplies, so they had to destroy them. Piles of mail, high as a haystack, piled up, set on fire. Barrels of whiskey, tops knocked out and poured out on the ground. Some of it didn't go that way. Sutlers' wagons were, the sutlers were caught there with their goods. The advancing Confederates didn't mind if there was a little charcoal mixed in. So there's stories about them scraping up coffee, and supplies, and filling their haversacks. All the ammunition that they left on the boxcars. And then they backed it down the Richmond and York River Railroad, set the thing on fire, And it's supposed to have exploded right over the Chickahominy River as it went over the bridge, or what was left of the bridge by then.
Supply shortages, primarily Confederate, as well as mounting casualties on both sides, gradually took their toll on morale. For some, the war became less about ideals and principles and more about mere survival.
I wasn't very concerned about the capital as much as I was concerned about myself. But those Yankees were pretty close and had a few of the soldier boys upset.
Some with that zeal in the beginning of the war, casualties took care of them.
That's why I don't like it. It needs to be over. For that reason, we're killing each other.
And as you progressed in the war, there was still some of it, but not as much.
The soldier ain't out there fighting for anything. He's out there fighting to stay alive, plain and simple.
I'm not happy with this, and it's not the adventure I thought it would be.
But the will to fight was still there on both sides.
I just did what every soldier did. He followed orders. He did what he was supposed to do.
You know, psychologically, I think everybody's doing pretty good considering some of the stuff that we've seen so far and some of the people that we've lost. But, you know, and being this close to home kind of helps out a little bit too.
I think the men really are not showing their feelings right now because they don't know how the battle is going to turn out.
The outcome, or lack thereof, ultimately came down to strategy and circumstance. The Confederates numbered 13,000 men as they approached the Union's 27,000. That stormy night, it was General Sumner at the tip of McClellan's spear, pointing back at the pursuing Magruder.
He's just lucky that Sumner, on the other side, believed in following orders. Because if Sumner had broken through, smashed back at him with 3 corps, would have disrupted Lee's whole plan. Because Longstreet and A.P. Hill were already on the way to Darbytown Road. Huger was over on Charles City Road. So there was a point there. You know, what if? He wasn't interested in just defeating McClellan, he was interested in annihilating him. And it didn't happen. At the point of attack, you should outnumber your adversary. It didn't happen. Sumner was mad that he couldn't, that he had to retire. He had to retreat. But McClellan had left the orders. By then, McClellan was retreating all the way to the James River. He was. His troops were still back here. The grand strategy that Lee had planned, and like I said, could have been broken up at Savage Station if Sumner had been a patent and said, the devil with orders, go.
Stalemates such as this paved the way for the war between the states to languish on for almost 3 more bloody years, claiming more than 600,000 lives in all. Time and time again, the mettle of both armies would be tested on Henrico soil.
In Henrico, the opposing armies were equal in that Greek meant Greek. They were both warrior armies. They had some pretty severe hand-to-hand fighting during that battle.
They're fighting like demons because they know that this is it. They've got to fight or they're going to end up getting killed or captured. So there are a lot of emotions during this period of time.
They weren't shooting 200 yards away with cannon and all that. They were up the muzzle. They were charging back and forth. Jenkins went in with his brigade and he came back, he started crying. He lost so many men. Good men, men that he knew. But they captured the guns. But still, it's that hand-to-hand, the adrenaline pumping on each side, the desire to conquer and the desire to hold. And it was stalemated. they were warriors.